The first draft of the script actually had me saying that I first got into Tokusatsu when I was in high school, but the more I think about it, that's not really the most accurate statement because, like so many other children in America, I grew up watching Power Rangers. And even beyond that, I had at least a passing respect for the Godzilla franchise, due mostly in part to the fact that Destroy All Monsters and Save the Earth were some top-tier games. But I would say that my genesis as a Tokusatsu fan in earnest really began when I was getting ready to graduate high school in 2012, and I discovered the recently ended Pirate Sentai Gokaiger. You see, it was around this time that I began to realize that I had a sort of genuine, unironic love for the pirate aesthetic. Don't know if you can tell from the channel. So when I heard that there was a Power Rangers series whose whole gimmick was piracy, I needed to see it. And I mean, this show was incredible. The effects were awesome, and just the action was so good. Like, I did enjoy Power Rangers back in the day, but I think we can all agree that it was not without its problems. A lot of which came down to seasons not really having the best actors or the best line delivery, in addition to just sort of having watered down writing, and that just, it felt like it was not taking children seriously as an audience at times, and that's why some of the better seasons that we remember are ones like Power Rangers RPM, which was actually like a genuinely unique and cool show with interesting writing, or seasons like Time Force, which were more straight adaptations of the Sentai. And then you have seasons like Power Rangers Samurai, which sort of fell in the middle, where it was trying to be more accurate, but the writing just, or not the writing, but the acting just wasn't up to snuff, and so the whole thing suffered as a result. But after discovering and falling in love with Gokaiger, like many other fans, I went on to discover Kamen Rider, which would eventually become my second great love, and frankly overtake my love of Sentai, if only by a little. And it was during this exploratory phase of becoming a new Tokusatsu fan that I laid my eyes upon the third member of the Tokusatsu Holy Trinity for the first time. Ultraman, the giant hero to match Kamen Rider's street-level approach and Sentai's hybrid formula. And I bounced right off of it, if I'm being honest. Yeah, you see, I've noticed that the larval cycle of new Tokusatsu fans tends to include a few embarrassing stages that we rarely manage to avoid, and I can't help but wonder if this is an American-exclusive phenomenon. Here's what I mean. You grow up in America, and your reference point for Tokusatsu is Power Rangers, a show that aired on one of a few children's programming blocks and definitely had children in mind as their primary audience. Refer to my statements only moments ago for examples of what I mean. They're basically everything utterly joyless people accuse Marvel movies of being. Also, quick tangent, but between writing the script and my time recording it now, we've basically gotten confirmation that Power Rangers is more or less officially dead in the West. Which is a crying shame, because for all of its issues that we begin to notice as we move more into being fans of Tokusatsu, Super Sentai, and everything in general, Power Rangers was a very important pillar of the community, and it is sad to be treated like this, especially when it did have potential to be a genuinely entertaining show. There's a reason that Super Sentai has endured as long as it has. Okay, tangent over. So, keeping everything we've discussed in mind, imagine being an American fan discovering Tokusatsu for the first time, and seeing a version of that cheesy thing you watched as a kid that actually takes itself seriously, and more importantly, doesn't feel shackled at the wrist to the Zordon era. What happens next is usually that you become a fanatic in the classical sense of the word, which is to say, a stark, raving lunatic. You feel like you have a duty to open the eyes of others, show them that this thing that so many of us laughed at in retrospect can actually be cool and awesome, and that an American company basically completely screwed us, and therefore now any Tokusatsu that isn't taking itself seriously is something you find yourself hating with a fiery passion. Power Rangers is dumb, it ruined Super Sentai, etc. So now imagine that in this state you run across a supposedly beloved Tokusatsu series, and it's everything the people around you make fun of Power Rangers and Godzilla for being. A dude in a goofy-ass rubber suit filmed in a way that makes you perfectly aware that they're just on a soundstage and is basically just doing pro wrestling techniques on a guy in a goofy-ass dinosaur costume. Now, the me of today realizes that this is literally the hypest shit ever, but again, the larval Tokusatsu fan is a pitiable creature that no doubt will show up in the comment section of this very video, still complaining about how Saban ruined Gokaiger by adapting it into Super Megaforce. Oh, wait, I am that Tokusatsu fan, and I will still never forgive them. But yes, Ultraman. Ultraman, 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 friend to the children the world over, and absolutely merciless dispatcher of kaiju. Seriously, from what I've seen, the kaiju in the Ultra series might get it the worst out of any of the big three Tokusatsu shows. Sure, getting blown up by a rider kick or a big combining weapon of a Sentai team may hurt, but I'd probably still rather be on the receiving end of them than getting chopped to bits by a laser like we're reenacting the first Resident Evil movie. Now, this isn't me trying to do the exact thing I was railing against earlier and make it all about how Ultraman is totally fucked up and serious business. It's more just a funny observation of how absolutely brutal this series can be so long as the one on the receiving end is a goofy-looking rubber monster. Honestly, from what I've seen so far, Ultraman just seems to be the series that has the most of that classic Tokusatsu practical effects spirit, and the unreality of it sort of becomes a lot of the charm I've found. I just had to sort of reformat my brain to get there, and now I'm going to tell you how I did in case there's anyone else out there who tried to like Ultraman but bounced off in the same way that I did. And maybe this is just me once again projecting my Catholic upbringing onto my experiences, but much like Tokusatsu has their holy trinity of Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Super Sentai, I was finally able to make my breakthrough thanks to a triumvirate of Ultraman media, the first of which is... Hideaki Anno's Shin Japan Heroes universe is probably best known in Western countries for 2016's Shin Godzilla. It updated the classic franchise that took Godzilla back to a much more eldritch horror direction and was praised not only for its fascinating take on the creature itself, but for showing just how humanity and human governments would go about handling the sudden appearance of such a creature. It is an incredibly imaginative film with great visuals and writing, and if you haven't seen it yet, I cannot recommend it enough, and if this sounds stiff and robotic, it's because this took me like 20 takes. However, while there's a good chance that the average American has at least heard of Shin Godzilla, not as many people would be aware of a later entry into that same universe, Shin Ultraman. Released in 2022, Shin Ultraman was a film with an entirely different ethos than Shin Godzilla. Rather than taking Godzilla back to its horror roots and playing those aspects up, Shin Ultraman is a movie that seeks to retell and condense the story of the original Ultraman series from 1966, with visuals that have been updated for a more modern audience. Now, I'm sure when I say updated visuals for a modern audience, a lot of you are probably going to think of something like the 2017 Power Rangers movie, and not only are you wrong for hating that movie, you're also wrong in your assumption because Shin Ultraman is more of a love letter to the original that faithfully preserves its spirit, based on what little I've seen of the original series, while making it accessible to a newer generation. What I mean by this is that while Ultraman has been updated from being a man in a suit to a CG creation, there was no attempt made to modernize the design in any way like you'd see when a spandex-suited Marvel character makes their first jump to the big screen. This Ultraman still embodies the look of the original almost to a T, but with all the imperfections sanded off and a shiny new coat of paint. And it works incredibly well because Ultraman is supposed to be an alien being. He's this uncanny extraterrestrial giant from the land of light, and the sleek perfection of this look combined with the slightly uncanny design and stolid face perfectly conveys his alien nature while not being so distracting that it takes you out of the experience. Ultraman's first two battles in the film against the kaiju Naronga and Gabora are the moments that truly illustrate what I mean by keeping the spirit of the original alive, because the choreography of these fights is entirely reminiscent of those classic rubber-suited wrestling moves in the original series, but with a weight lended to them by the combatants that makes all the difference in convincing the non-believers like myself. No longer did I feel like I was watching two dudes rolling around on a soundstage, and instead, I was fully immersed into an epic clash between giants who made the very earth shiver and crack beneath their tread. And it isn't just these knockdown, drag-out fights that are infused with love for the source material. Everything about Ultraman's movement in this film calls back to the days of practical effects in a way that works beautifully for it. When Ultraman flies, he jumps straight up into the air and soars rigid still in a pose that perfectly matches the toys that would be filmed in front of a backdrop during the original days. And it works incredibly well because that degree of rigid stillness lent to his flight in the movie works in contrast to everything else in its world to emphasize the alien matter in which Ultraman moves, as if the entire universe is shifting around him. And all of the things I've gushed about so far are purely on the visuals. I haven't even touched on how much I enjoy the story of this film because that's not really what this video is intended to be. I'm not here to give you a review of Shin Ultraman, I'm telling you to go watch it. You don't really need to know anything about Ultraman going in. I barely did, and the people I watched it with probably knew less than I did, and we all had a great time. Of course, with all that said, even though I really enjoyed the movie, it's not like I came out of it immediately ready to go look up whatever the most recent Ultraman series was and start watching. But it was important because it basically unlocked this part of my brain that says, oh, I see the appeal now, I get why people like Ultraman, and I don't know, maybe I could actually get into this sometime. And thus I was primed to stop looking down on Ultraman as the ugly stepsister of the Tokusatsu world. He had gained my respect, even if I was still a ways away from actually watching one of his shows. Honestly, I wouldn't really think about Ultraman in earnest again until a few years later, with the release of... Now this film is one you might have actually heard about recently because it seems to have managed to escape the grasp of the Tokusatsu fandom to find genuine widespread appeal. Shannon Tyndall's Ultraman Rising was released earlier this year and provides a very different take on the character than somebody who's familiar with the source material might expect. It's also something that was kind of a mixed bag for me from the get-go. When that first trailer dropped, there were things that I liked and things that I didn't. But I'll start off with what I liked. The visuals are immediately striking. Gorgeous, even. The first thing that's going to come to a lot of people's mind when they see this is the Spider-Verse films, and that is setting great expectations for quality. We then go on to see our main character transform into Ultraman with a heavily stylized design and fluid motion. I love that too. And then... he talks. In fact, he doesn't just talk, he quips.
That is for messing up my game!
Now, let me set the record straight right now by saying that I don't have issues with quips in concept. I actually really enjoy the MCU and am rarely, if ever, bothered by the quippiness of their characters. I think it suits them well for characterization purposes. But, and this could have just been my inexperience with the Ultraman franchise in retrospect, when I think of Ultraman, I think of this stoic alien being. The idea of Ultraman talking in a way that people could understand feels off to me, and hearing him say, "That's for ruining my game," after punching a kaiju, I don't know, man. While there certainly were bits about the trailer that got my attention, I decided that the film just probably wasn't for me and that I would give it a miss. Then it showed up everywhere. All over social media, I was seeing posts about how good the film was, and not just from Tokusatsu fans. People everywhere were watching this movie and gushing about not only the beautiful animation, but the amount of heart it had. Eventually, I relented and decided to give the movie a fair shake. After all, helping any Tokusatsu property get a better foothold in America can only be a good thing for the industry and the fans. Toei! Sorry, it's basically impossible to talk about Tokusatsu on YouTube without getting at least a little bit of a rage in the guts about Toei. Back to Ultraman. Okay, so as it turns out, it wasn't just the Ken Sato thirst traps that were helping this movie make a name for itself. While it definitely is a completely different experience than a lot of Tokusatsu fans might have been expecting going in, the story of a newly appointed Ultraman having to raise the orphan child of a fallen kaiju after it imprints on him is genuinely heartwarming, especially in how it mirrors Ken's own difficult relationship with his parents. As the film went on, the talkative and quippy Ultraman began to bother me less and less because it doesn't feel like they're turning Ultraman into some one-dimensional character, and instead it actually feels kinda natural because we spend enough time with Ken in human form to see him when he becomes Ultraman, and he's just speaking the way that he always does. It's a delicate balance, but the film pulls it off way better than I would have given them credit for from the trailer. There is honestly so much to love about Ultraman Rising that I can't even begin to go into detail about it here, especially not while trying to keep the runtime of this video low, so again I suggest that you go watch this one for yourself in addition to Shin Ultraman, if only to form your own opinion. But the one thought that kept repeating in the back of my mind while I was watching Ultraman Rising was, I mean, this is fun, but it makes me want to watch a proper Ultraman series. I should probably do that when this is over. And as it turns out, the timing worked out really well because at the time, the world was only a few weeks away from the premiere of... Ultraman Arc is, at least according to Wikipedia, the 36th entry into the Ultraman franchise, and at time of writing, it is the most recent currently airing Ultraman show, and follows the adventures of Yuma Hise, who is now bonded to the titular Ultraman Arc. Now, honestly, my storytelling in the last segment was a little bit of a lie because I already knew that Arc was on its way. Frankly, if you're part of the online Tokusatsu fandom, it was probably inescapable for you like it was me. The marketing push for this show was huge, and deservedly so. In fact, one of the reasons that I decided to just relent and give Rising a chance was because seeing all the pre-release marketing for Arc meant that I kept finding myself wondering if it was finally time to give Ultraman another shot. Remembering how much I enjoyed Shin Ultraman, and enjoying Rising to the point that I actually wanted to watch a proper live-action Ultraman show, the timing for Arc's release was all but perfect, and I imagine I'm not the only person who fell into this pattern. Having now evolved from my larval tokusatsu fan form into somebody who enjoys the ridiculous just as much as they enjoy the serious, Ultraman Arc was a blast from frame one. The fight scenes wherein we see Arc and the kaiju fighting against a backdrop of obvious miniature sets combined with these adorable model tanks is just so perfect, though honestly that might be because I've been getting into Warhammer again lately and I've got miniature brain. But of all the tokusatsu productions, it feels the most in touch with its roots, going all the way back to those classic Godzilla films. And the really cool bit is that even though Arc is wearing its tokusatsu nature on its sleeve, that doesn't detract it from having incredibly visually impressive moments. There are two shots that I can't stop thinking about from the first few episodes that have also made their way around the internet and really illustrate how impressive this show can be. Firstly, there is the sequence from episode 1 wherein Ultraman creates an energy shield to protect himself, then proceeds to break it over his knee to use as a stabbing weapon. This is the coolest shit, like, oh my god, dude. The second is this genius transition during a fight in the third episode wherein we've been watching news footage of the battle between Arc and the Kaiju of the Week, and when Arc gets knocked down, the TV in the building explodes because we were watching from inside the building that Ultraman just got knocked into. It is incredible! Stanley Kubrick, who? This is Kino! And surrounding all of these visually impressive moments is a genuinely interesting story. Our protagonist, Yuma, works for SKIP, the Strategic Kaiju Intervention and Prevention Center, as what is essentially a kaiju biologist. This is the kind of world building that gets me going, man. Yuma and his colleagues study kaiju as natural biological phenomena in addition to the living disasters that they represent in order to build a scientific understanding of a post-kaiju world. We actually get to see this in the premiere episode when the team is sent out to investigate a kaiju horn. Look, I promise you, it is a horn. In fact, it's a horn that broke off of one of the first kaiju to invade the Earth and has since begun giving off strange readings. As it turns out, these readings were coming from a parasite that was living inside of the horn and proceeds to break out when they get near it and infect a smaller kaiju living in a nearby cave. From here, we see the members of SKIP using their knowledge of kaiju as living creatures to determine the exact nature of the threat and how best to proceed as an emergency service in a way that feels naturalistic and fascinating to watch, even as there's a giant blue robot in the background. Of course, all hell eventually breaks loose regarding the infected kaiju, and we get the aforementioned awesome fight scene to cap the episode off. At time of writing, there are 4 episodes of Ultraman Arc available, and all of them have been highly entertaining, following the nature of what it's like to work for SKIP, as well as Yuma's double life as Ultraman Arc, cleaning up the messes that his organization can't. The characters are entertaining and likable, and the kaiju designs are imaginative and wacky, truly stealing the show. I am really looking forward to seeing where Arc goes as the series continues, and so should you. And in fact, you have no excuse not to look forward to it because you can watch the entire thing for free right here, right now on YouTube. Yeah, as part of that huge marketing push I mentioned, Tsuburaya is not only uploading every episode of Arc to YouTube, absolutely free to watch, they even have a simuldub version going up on its own Ultraman English channel, also completely free to watch. And regardless of your feelings on live-action dubs, you have to admit it's incredibly cool of them to think of their international fans like that.
Coffee time.
What?
When you hit a dead end, coffee can stimulate your mind.
Do we have any coffee? No?
There's no need to grind fresh beans. A normal coffee maker will do fine.
We don't have that, right? Yeah, no.
I mean, look, even the kanji has been translated as stylized English text. That is an insane level of effort that just goes to show how much Tsuburaya cares about helping this show reach as wide of an audience as possible. And that is honestly one of the coolest things I have noticed about Ultraman since getting into it. Without meaning to slander the rights holders of certain other tokusatsu franchises that I won't make content on because they don't seem to understand how fair use works, Tsuburaya seems to have a real love for their fan base, both domestic and abroad. In fact, I think it's kind of funny how many, including myself, will talk about Ultraman as if it's some unknown quality, because America is really one of the only countries where Ultraman never really caught on the way the rest of the world did. But things do seem to be moving in a new direction in recent years. Tsuburaya really seems determined to make every effort not only to cater to, but to also grow their North American fan base. From greenlighting Ultraman Rising, to making their shows available online, to multiple collaborations with Marvel Comics, and confirming an American release of the upcoming Ultraman trading card game, the stateside future for this franchise looks so bright that it might just be from Nebula M78. I totally didn't just read that off of my phone because I couldn't remember the number. And for now, that's where we're gonna leave things. So if you enjoyed this video, please go watch Ultraman. Rising, Shin, or Arc, you can't go wrong. And hey, before you leave, could you please leave a like and a sub, and maybe even check out one of my other videos? If you like Tokusatsu, then I recommend my video on Super Women in Love, the Tokusatsu manga where Yuri is the strongest force in the universe. And just remember that this has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways. Shwatch!